Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's art and illustration recap video. My name is Pierre Draculea. I'm here to talk about the art and illustration I've done this week. So let's switch over to the document camera. That is my streaming schedule. In case anyone's wondering, that's over on the main channel. So we do Ricky and Myles stuff. Currently Myles on Monday. Tuesday and Thursday, Noah's Archipelago, and Wednesday, Zamo the Destroyer, and Friday, Ricky and Myles, currently Ricky. So let's get right into what I've been up to this week with some Ricky work. This is from Friday, and we did 3 more pages in the Ricky B Goes to Sea graphic novel. So where we left off last week was Ricky's cousin Darren, having been shown Ricky's plans to build a submarine to go down to the Titanic wreck to get the big shiny rock from the shipwreck movie to impress his girlfriend. Ricky was hoping Darren would build this thing for him. Darren builds hot rods. And what we last saw was Darren saying, "I can build anything." Now he's continuing on, "But I won't, because your mom is crazy and she'll come after me." Ricky pointing out he doesn't know anything about welding to do it himself. Darren saying good, so now Ricky's leaving, all pissed off. And he continues to dumpster dive. I'm just going to switch to the document camera. Got like a hair stuck in my mouth, so... Figured nobody needs to see me do that. Pull that out. Anyways, so Ricky's dumpster diving for parts for his submarine, and that was the first page. But then we carry on, and clearly I need to tidy up these lines here, but we have a recap of what's been going on with Ricky's boss, Big Mike. So he's in Paris, and Mrs. Mike reached in, grabbed Big Mike's phone. This is going to be a spread like this. See some text messages. Gonna beat the shit out of Big Mike with his own suitcase. Clearly, Mrs. Mike here is raticidal. Her name's Brandy, by the way, and she is the aunt of Jeff, who is one of the mix engineers who works at Big Mike's studio. But anyways, we'll get into Jeff later. So then she goes shopping to make that prick pay one way or another. And we're going to fly through pretty quick today. So next on Monday, we were back to our buddy Myles. Now, the Myles Marv's Pursuit of Happiness project. I've been going through and doing 2 pages of illustration, sometimes a spread, sometimes separate, for each letter of the alphabet, and then I will be writing short stories about those. And we're getting to the end. This week was Y, so yacht. And we've got Myles looking at a brochure for the Azamos Nerve 42, which is a Cartoon World knockoff of the Azimuth Verve 42 pocket cruiser. So I was watching a whole bunch of like walkthroughs on this yacht, which is probably going to confuse my YouTube algorithm a bit, but whatever. And then we see Myles has bought the Azamos Nerve 42 with the triple outboard motors. He's named it the Tail Chaser 2, based in Oil Slick Bay. And, you know, he's got his champagne and his key, and he's got the yacht all to himself. So, although he can certainly bring on bimbos if he wants bimbos on the boat, which he may at times. But mostly Myles just likes to drive around real fast and not interact with other mouse people. So with this project, this coming week, we will do the Z, or depending where you live in your preference, Z drawings. And then the week after that, we're going to start a new project involving Ricky and Myles, which will be a smaller project, which will actually be and illustrations for a short story that I wrote a couple years ago, and that's going to become a PDF that will be a free download for my newsletter signups. I still have to build the newsletter, like set it up. I've done the account, but I haven't written any of like the onboarding or anything else, so I got to do that next week. But anyways, we'll be doing these little projects actually Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, or Monday, Wednesday. What am I saying? Not Monday, Wednesday. Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Where did the Monday, Wednesday, Friday come from? I don't know. But the first 3 days of the week, we'll all be working on 3 different freebie projects for the newsletter. For a couple months anyways. The Zamo one we're going to start next week. And the Ricky and Myles one and the Noah one the week after. But anyways, so there we have our buddy Myles. And then once I kind of get through that, by then I should have had at least some of the short stories written so I can come back, and then the Myles Marav's Pursuit of Happiness will resume on Mondays, certainly by September, I would think. And we will be doing other little illustrations for the stories and whatnot, getting the book ready. So now where is my Noah stream thing? There we go. So on Tuesday, Noah, what started as the Noah's Archipelago 2027 calendar, and now is the Noah's Book of Days. I'm going to adjust this a little bit. Things are looking a little trapezoidal. I don't want to screw with the camera too much because sometimes I make it worse. But basically, these illustrations are going to be like chapter headings. So for November, I was thinking Election Day. Now here in Canada, our elections are kind of all over the place. But since our American friends always have elections in November, and I think that goes even down to the school board trustee level, I have Ursula, Noah's daughter, going up to the school board receptionist. She doesn't quite understand how you become a school board trustee, let alone the fact that I'm pretty sure you have to be an adult. Anyways, the receptionist says, "How can I help you?" And Ursula says, "I'm here to become dictator of the school board and ban fractions homework." And the receptionist sighs. "You're the 6th, 3rd grader this morning." So I did that one, and that was a relatively quick drawing because it's not super detailed, which meant that I had time to do another of the cast portraits, which will actually be for a different Noah book project, because I'm also in the midst, almost done, working on the first Noah's Archipelago comic treasury from when it was a webcomic. I think I've talked before. I know I've talked before on these videos when recording, but I think I've tended to cut it out for reasons of time. But I'm waiting to get my ISBN stuff sorted out because you can do it for free through the Canadian government, Library and Archives Canada. But there's like 6-week long delays to get your account set up, and then it's like a month-long delay to actually get your ISBN. So I've had time to kill, so I'm doing cast portraits as a bonus to fill it, to just make the book a little bit fatter. So we've seen some of these before. I know what I just said about not messing with the camera, but we're going to mess with it to make this bigger. Don't fall over. Stay. And Miss Fardamar, I did that one in May. I've shown it on previous recap videos. But the one I did last night was the baby, Valerie. And I did make Valerie's head too small, but I can fix that in Photoshop. Just go, but anyways, Valerie is sleeping in her bassinet, and she is dreaming of being a ninja in the jungle. And I think on stream I was talking a lot about how much I hate bamboo, and their whole story about that as an invasive weed. So so that was the Tuesday live stream. Now on Wednesday, we had Zamo the Destroyer, and let me just show the other one first. So we've been doing images, views into Zamo's secret basement lab. I'm just gonna move this out of the way because now it's hard for me to tell when I've got stuff in focus. Anyway, so the first one I did was Zamo's desk, and Zamo's got this old-fashioned typewriter. Zamo being an iguana with little iguana hands. I mean, when I had an iguana, her front hands were about the size of my thumbnail. So she wouldn't actually be able to type on a regular human keyboard. So what she has is she has a stick that she's like wrapped a little ball around the end of, and she types by doing this. So we see the stick there. Reading Freud. I'm going to fix this because I was originally going to do it all as a bulletin board, and I remembered, oh yeah, I've got writing on here, so that's a whiteboard. Duh. I can Photoshop out those dots, and then this is the bulletin board side. And Zamo insists that Zamo is an anthropology professor at the Iguanid University of the Jungle, working on postdoctoral research. So perhaps this is thesis stuff. Zamo's also claims to be the editor of Iguana Digest Monthly, so that could also be other stuff. But we've got a bit of a messy desk and then a mandarin orange in the corner for a snack for later. And then we had a view of Zamo's alchemy setup because Zamo loves gold. And, you know, the whole thing with dragons and a dragon horde and whatnot. Zamo's got a poster of a dragon surrounded by gems and gold bars and gold goblets and gold coins. It says gold, days without making gold, however. Because, you know, the alchemy thing doesn't really work. You know, I don't want to burst anyone's bubble, but it doesn't actually work. But Zamo is still going to try. So Zamo's got this textbook about alchemy experiments. Old-fashioned weigh scale, some fishing lead weights, and this is melting some stuff down in a Bunsen burner. I don't know how Georgie would feel about knowing that there was open flame going on in her crawl space under her living room, but, you know, there's some things that Georgie just doesn't need to know. Georgie Bean's almost pet human. And then we got the propane tank and more crud metal to melt into gold, more beakers. But anyways, I did the math because I started this comic in 2006, and it's now 2026. So I did the math on how many days would 20 years be. So yeah, Zamo's been at it a long time and still no gold. But you know, Zamo's going to keep trying. It's a hobby after all. Now, then I thought I would do some books from Zamo's research library. Some of these are real book titles or modified from real book titles, and some of them not so much. So we've got Nuclear Fission by Enola Press, 101. Beyond Good and Evil. I don't think it's a good sign when a scientist is relying on Nietzschean philosophy for ethics, but you know. Clinical Chemistry, Coincidences and Principles, Ethics for Behavioral Analytics. I'm going to take a wild guess and say that one's never been opened. How to Lie Like Margaret Mead. You know, Zamo is an anthropologist, and oh, there's stories about that. I know that there's some Margaret Mead fans who insist that it's all BS, and that what Margaret Mead said was really true, and the Samoans were, you know, having wild, you know, Studio 54 style orgies until Christianity was introduced, but the Samoans say that was never the case. But they had this crazy white woman asking them creepy questions about their sex lives, and so they'd be like, "Oh yeah, we do all this sort of stuff," and she'd be like taking notes, like, "Oh my God." Mead had this like fantasy that she wanted to find, and I also say that because, again, former anthropology major, I was there because my thought was I was going to become an archaeologist studying Babylonian cuneiform tablets. I think I've told this story on a previous recap, or it might have been like a scuttlebutt on my main channel from December or something, but I know I've told the story. But you work backwards. If you want to study Sumerian cuneiform, you learn that to read, you learn the Sumerian language, and you start doing that research at the PhD level. In order to qualify for one of those PhD programs, you have to do a master's program where you would learn Akkadian, which is the Babylonian language. That's where you first learn the basics of cuneiform. In order to qualify for one of those master's programs, your bachelor's degree, you need to have an archaeology major, and you should also have like history of the Near East. So I went to UBC for my undergrad. I actually never graduated because I changed my major like 3 times. It's a whole thing. Never mind. But when I was in the major program, archaeology at UBC is in the anthropology department. So you have to take a lot of cultural anthropology. And then I was a double major with religious studies because at that time, that's where the Near Eastern history is. Now I think it's, anyways, they've changed the department structure and it's a whole thing. But since then, so the path I took, none of those classes are still called the same thing. But and I did that for a couple years, and then I had some health issues in '98. And when I came back from them, I decided to change my major. I went into theater because I knew I wanted to get into the music industry, and I figured, well, if I do theater and learn lighting and the tech side of theater, then that would set me up for that. And then I eventually just went to the music department. And anyways, it's blah, blah, blah. But I had to take some cultural anthropology classes, okay? Which meant that I also met some cultural anthropology grad students. And believe me, after you've met a few of them, some of them are great, and some of them you totally see why Margaret Mead wrote the stuff she did, because you can totally see that I hate my parents, and I have this idealized notion that there are other societies where people are the exact opposite of my parents. So I'm going to go study those and like get government grants. I'm sounding like an asshole. I know that, and they're not all that way, but they exist. Those types of anthropologists exist. And there's some questionable, a lot of them also, the fad has come up. And I know it's in response to like Franz Boas, and also people like Margaret Mead, where they had an idea of what the society was going to be like, and they just, the conclusions were written, and then they just pretended that the research, they would see what they wanted to see and write the papers, right? In reaction against that, then you've started to have the practice, and it was happening already in the 90s, where instead of the outside anthropologist comes with their preconceived notions and takes notes that support those preconceived notions, now it's very much on the peoples in that culture that you're studying. They tell you what's going on in their culture, and you write that down and you don't question it. The truth is in the middle, okay? Because people lie. Like, for example, there have definitely been cultures that were cannibals over the years, and then when that became not cool because, say, they were Christianized or whatever, then sometimes it would be like, oh, we never did that. But the people on the next island, like over there, and then those people say that the first island were so you go around in a circle where it's like, oh, no, not us. But the next guy's over. People do tend to want to present their own culture in the most favorable light, which is incentive to lie in many cases. And then it depends on the government structure and the government. Anyways, it gets to be a mess. The point is that anthropology really isn't, again, I'm sure there is some anthropology being done. I'm sure that is somewhat accurate, but a lot of it is take it with the whole box of salt, is the way to put it, okay? So then, so I was out of the anthropology department certainly by 2000. I started the Zamo the Destroyer comic in 2006. Now, I had an iguana for 10 years, and including the period when I was an anthropology major, and we used to joke that she was doing field work, because in theory, the idea with anthropology fieldwork is you go to an event, and you sit in the corner and you take notes, and it's supposed to be that the people, as if you weren't there, the people act naturally, except they have allowed you to come in. Like, you're not doing a hidden camera thing where they don't know you're there. They know they're being studied, right? Anyways, so there's an issue right there. And then if you just go and pretend that you're not an anthropologist, then there's ethical issues there. Anyways, it's a whole mess. And I don't want to turn this into an hour-long lecture about anthropology. But my iguana she had a big cage in the living room, and she would at times, even when we had the door open, she wouldn't want to come out and hang out with us. She'd just like sit on the edge of the cage with, like, it had like a bit of a, not a lip, but like the door started about 6 inches up. So she put her hands on the edge, and then she put her chin on, and she just kind of watch us. So, and we'd like sometimes bring her out, put her on the sofa, and she'd look back and forth, and then she'd go back in the cage and she'd sit there and watch us. And we were like, okay, she's not in the mood. But I used to joke, because I was taking anthropology class, I said, she's doing field work. She is observing us in our natural environment. She's going to write a report on it. So anyways, that was kind of a family joke with the real iguana. So when I started the comic, Zamo the Destroyer, I made Zamo an anthropologist. So I actually I found some of my old like reading materials from anthropology classes, like when they would do like a pile of Xeroxes and all that for readings. And sometimes I would go and use those as reference material that Zamo would be bastardizing and whatnot. And Zamo, of course, has an agenda, because Zamo doesn't like humans and views humanity as a bunch of stupid chimps, and iguanas should rule the world. And anyway, so it was a bit of a spoof on anthropology. Anyways, that's a long-winded explanation for why Zamo has a book called How to Lie Like Margaret Mead. And then we have primate zoology and the anthropology of cannibalism. Now, there is actually a book, because during the stream, I like opened Amazon in another tab on my computer, and I was like searching anthropology textbooks to spoof. And there is actually one called The Anthropology of Cannibalism. In fact, I think there's 2 different ones. It did not have the subtitle of a family cookbook. That I added. But I just thought those would be funny books that Zamo would have and take at face value. You know, like, yes, the chimps are all cannibals. And yes, Zamo would say that all humans are chimps, because we have 98% chimpanzee DNA, and Zamo would say that rounds up to 100%. Zamo, however, insisted that Zamo and all iguanas had 98% T-Rex DNA. And any paleontologist who tells you otherwise is a lying sack of shit. Anyways, these are going to be 2 separate drawings, so it cuts off there. And then the top one, physical anthropology, I think this is actually based on one that came up in the Amazon flip through. And it was called Introduction to Physical Anthropology, but it had a chimpanzee on the cover, like a close-up of the chimp face, and then it had like one of the early hominid skulls with reconstructions there. So I took the idea and made it more zomified, changed the title slightly and added the subtitle King Kong to King Tut. Published by Banana Books. You know, the finest purveyors of quality anthropological research textbooks. And then Zamo likes running scams and kind of getting money out of humans for kind of nothing. So Scams 1 in 1 for fun and profit. Guide to Home Chemistry Experiments for the Amateur. That's not an actual book title, but it's similar to one that was like Guide for Home Chemistry Experiments or something like that. Sex Lives of Cannibals. There isn't a "the" there. I need to Photoshop that out and scoot that over. That's an actual book, and it's really funny. I went into more depth about it in the Wednesday stream, but it's a guy whose wife had a degree in international relations, and she was able to get a job for, I think, the UN. Her first job out of college, but they had to go to Kiribati, which is actually spelled Kiribati, Kiratabi, or Kiribati. I'm dyslexic apparently. Kirabati. So he did talk about the people he met there and the way the culture was when he lived there in the 90s for a year, and the difficulties of living on a small coral atoll. Like, there's not a lot of fresh water and like food supplies and all that. But it's a very informative book, also very funny. And he's written a few of his travels in the South Pacific and whatnot. So J. Martin Troost. So highly recommend. Of course, I would see Zamo reading that book not as a fun and funny travel memoir, but as a, oh, okay, this is what they do, and therefore that's what all humans do. Gold Mining for Fun, A Beginner's Guide for Finding Gold. That's a real book, and that's the actual author's name. I haven't read it, but I envision Zamo, well, we already established Zamo wants gold, so I figured a small, thin book, and I figured I might as well give it a plug by putting it in there. And then the bottom is, it's cut off, but it's supposed to be a guide, a handbook of hypnotic suggestions. Because, Zamo, one of the other that I showed on a previous recap video was Zamo trying to hypnotize squirrels with a little pendulum with the acorn on the bottom. Anyways, so what this all means is the first Zamo book is actually done. I thought I was going to do these drawings of little glimpses into Zamo's secret basement lab and make them into an appendix on the first Zamo the Destroyer comic omnibus. Well, the only Zamo the Destroyer comic omnibus. Because I think I did like 138, 150 comics, something like that. I think 138 in English, and then for a while I was taking French lessons, so I did some French comics as well. But I realized looking through the last year of comics, there's like 3 or 4 mentions of Zamo's secret basement lab, but it's really more of a thing when I came back with Zamo, because, okay, so I did the Zamo comic 2006 to 2009, then it went on hiatus because I didn't have time. That was when I was actually in the music industry, sort of, kind of. And then in 2014, I was getting into more interest in comedy and coming back to art. I thought I was going to reboot the comic, actually in 2013. So we've inked that reboot because I had drawn one and I never did anything with it. So that was a couple months ago. That will be in the comic omnibus, of course, as the coda. And then 2014, I launched it as a podcast. I have 200 and some odd podcast scripts. So I'm going to turn those into short stories. I may merge if there's an arc going over a couple different episodes, I may merge that into one story or whatever. I still have to look through it. But we will be illustrating a bunch of scenes from those stories. So it'll be a short story book that has like illustrations popped in. So we will be doing that on stream, but I'm going to take a little break to go do illustrations for The World According to Zamo, which is an hour-long podcast episode that I actually posted on CITR Radio's 24 Hours of Radio Art in 2015. So starting next week, we are going to be working on illustrations for that book. And then that's, when that is finished, that will become like a free PDF. Again, it's a newsletter thing. Again, I need to actually get my newsletter set up and available for people to sign up to. I keep mentioning it, but it's been a process because I'm busy and distracted. But anyways, next week we will start working on The World According to Zamo. Once that's done and it's up on the newsletter thing, then by then I will have had time to go through the first couple of Zamo podcasts, and we'll start illustrating those and working on those books. And it'll probably be, I don't know, there's at least 225 podcast episodes, and some of them are like, some of them were like 20-minute long things, which works out to about 2,500 words. Which would be like 10 pages just in the text. So, like you start figuring out and go like, oh, ew, I'm probably going to do like 10 books of Zamo based off of just the stuff I already written. Never mind like writing any new stories, which at some point I would like to. But anyways, so this wraps up why I was saying that. Because the Zamo Secret Basement Lab is more of a fixture in the podcast scripts, all these drawings I thought were going to be for the comic omnibus as an appendix, I'm going to put them in the first book of Zamo stories. So, but hey, that means that I've got a whole bunch of, I think I've got 8 illustrations already done for that. So anyways, let's go back to our bug-eyed friend Noah. Good enough. So it's the current comic book is the A to Z of Noah's job history. There have been some changes with this. I was previously saying on my previous plans prior to this week, I was going like, each job, A to Z, each letter is going to have like 2 jobs. Some of them will have 3. Q only has 1. But then I kind of thought, why don't I just, basically I did market research, competitive analysis. I looked at info on the bestsellers in the humorous adult or humorous coloring books for grown-ups, humorous category on Amazon. And I looked through the top 100 bestsellers, particularly the top 25, and I noticed a trend. They pretty much all have 40 illustrations. So that 40 illustrations, which kind of makes sense because the thinner the book, the easier it is to like get into, the gutter and whatnot. A lot of them are 8.5 by 8.5. Now, this is going to be letter sized. But I was kind of thinking like, okay, so there's 26 layers of the alphabet. So rather than make it double, why? And I know I'm going to have some other illustrations coming in where like Ursula interrupts Noah. Like mostly I'm illustrating Noah's jobs, but there's like a little story that goes with it. And we're going to have some illustrations for the story. So I was like, you know what? Why don't I make it 2 books? The first book is going to be A to Z, 1 job per illustration plus the story. And then I'll work on a different Noah coloring book. And then we'll come back at a later date to Noah's jobs and we'll do more Noah's jobs, right? So that does mean the book will, it also means the book will come out sooner, right? Because I have basically half as many illustrations as I had planned. I think it's going to be better. So, plus then, I mean, I can keep the general price point is about $15, $14, $15. So I think I can match that then a little better. And anyways, blah, blah, blah. So, which means we're getting closer to being done. We will be finished this coloring book, I believe, by the end of July, if I'm able to keep doing 2 pages per, because I'm going to be done with the actual jobs, I think, in 2 weeks. I think I've only got 4 left. I have to look at that. And then sort of the story illustrations will do. And then I have to scan it and all this. So it probably still won't come out until January, but we're going to have it done a lot sooner than if I plowed through another 26 jobs, right? So the jobs I did on Thursday night this week, narrator and face painter. And I drew them on drew narrator on the page that was supposed to be face painter. So anyways, so we've got Noah. He's in his little vocal booth that he's got set up in a corner somewhere. We haven't seen this in the comic yet. He may actually be in a studio, I don't know, but if you can set one up at home and do your voiceovers at home, then you save yourself quite a bit of money, which means more profit. So anyways, he's got his computer that Ursula has stuck a bunch of stickers on the back of, which is my solution to filling up just like a blank iMac back. He's got his microphone. This is based on the Shure SM7. I have a Shure SM7. I completely forgot. The actual plug goes here. Like it's got like the thread that would go onto a mic stand, and then it's got right in front of that going straight down is the connector for the XLR cable, and then there's just a little wire that comes around here, but I didn't think of that when I was drawing it. Mics plug into the back. Yeah, most of them do, but not the SM7. Anyways, so we're ignoring that detail. Audio nerds will know and be annoyed by it, but, well, I mean, I'm an audio nerd myself. I got over it. You will too. Just seeing a little thing where that doesn't quite connect there. Anyways, and he's got a boom mic, kind of like I have. This is actually for my phone when I'm streaming vertically. But you can get these that then have the connector for mics. Radio stations have those and whatnot, and you can buy them. So, anyways, he's got an arm. It's coming down from up this direction, and then it's going straight down. He's got his little pop filter. He's reading, and what is he reading? 50 Tints of Trash. I think we know what book that's based on. And Noah, of course, because he's doing it for the money, we've got dollars and cents and pounds and euros and yen on his face is the pattern. And he's got his reading glasses, which I find amusing. Noah normally never shows himself wearing glasses, but he's at that age. He's in his late 40s. So anyways, obviously this is not something that Ursula would be reading or listening to, but that's okay. Ursula hates books anyways, unless they have dinosaurs in them. As far as I know, there is not a 50 Shades of T-Rex smut dinosaur book, although Lord knows, I shouldn't say that. Somebody has absolutely written one and is selling it on Amazon for $3.99 because that's just the way of the world. But anyways, so that was one of his jobs, narrator. And then the other one was face paint. Now, this I figured, I just had this vision of Noah wanting to practice tiger faces. So if this was an actual client, the client would probably be happy because he's done a pretty good job of drawing in the tiger stuff. But I decided to make it Ursula, that he was practicing the morning of his face painting gig. Noah, he's dressed up as a clown again. Clown is not one of the jobs listed in this book. Maybe that's going to be in part 2. But we've seen him dressed as a clown doing balloon animals, and we know he's done busker type jobs and whatnot. So he got a face painting gig and he had to practice. Ursula wanted to, and I think the story part for this is going to be Noah ask her if he remembers, you remember when Daddy was face painting and used to practice with you? And she would have a response something along the lines of, I remember saying I wanted to be a T-Rex and you kept making me into a cat. It's like, yes, but I needed to practice the cat. And also I just realized sometimes we do work on these. I try and kind of have the iris kind of separated. So I forgot to do that during the stream last night. So there we have it. Now it's done. His butterfly they drew on his own face is kind of asymmetrical, but it's also an angle. So, we're getting, oh, wow. I was going to say we got through this quick, except then I decided I was going to rant about anthropology. But you know what? We are going to still wrap it up pretty quick because there isn't a doodle zone. Not that I haven't been doing doodles, but the doodles I've been doing have been in sketchbooks. They're thumbnails for those newsletter projects. So that is stuff we will be seeing the real drawings starting in about 2-3 weeks. Well, we'll see the first of the Zamo ones next week. And then the others the week after. So I thought, rather than spend time flipping through, and this is the thing that we're going to see the proper drawing of in like a month, I just skipped it. I didn't have time this week to do like doodles that weren't brainstorming or thumbnailing for upcoming projects, so we'll leave that. I didn't bring any previous finishes. What have I been watching this week? What's been my inspiration this week? I did finish I Hate Fairyland. I talked about that last week. And I've been reading, I think it's called Fortune and Glory by, his last name's Brandis. Brian Michael Brandis, maybe? The guy who did the comic, the graphic novel Jinx. It's kind of a memoir based on his, Hollywood coming to call and all this sort of stuff. So I'm about a third of the way through that. It's really funny. My only complaint on it is the page layout. Some of the word bubbles are really close to the gutter and you're having to almost like, kind of almost break the back to get in there, which that's just good information for me as a graphic novelist to go like, okay, this is why I say on Ricky B. the Rock and Roll Rat, we're going to have that border a 1/2 inch all the way around because it eliminates that issue. But that's just, you know, that's a minor nitpick. I'm enjoying the story and the art and all that. I don't have it on my desk to hold it up and show it, so maybe I'll remember to do that next week. Biggest challenges this week has just been time management. Honestly, what I've spent a lot of time this week doing is the spring clean out in my backyard that I didn't do a couple months ago and should have. So like my dad and I yesterday took like a whole truckload of cuttings to the dump. Like, well, it's a recycling depot, but you can dump your yard waste there. So that's been a whole lot of it. And getting back into walking. Yesterday was the 4th day in a row of doing like over 8,000 steps. Yesterday was actually 10,000 steps. So today I'm kind of taking it a little easy. I've been for my walk. When I finish this, I'm going to go run some errands down in Victoria. So I'll probably get up to about 7,000 steps today, but I'm not going to, you know, kind of take it half-assed easy. But anyways, we're making progress there. The scale doesn't know it yet, but, you know, I know from previous, you know, even last summer, I started walking and whatnot. Nothing happens. 3 weeks, boom, down 5 pounds, boom, you know. So, you know, I had actually lost about 20 pounds last year, basically just walking and still having some candy, but not quite as much. So I'm going to do that again this year. I mean, I did regain about 5 over the winter because I got lazy because, you know, the weather is bad and it's cold. I know. Anyways, but I'm still down 15 overall, so I'm trying to get down another 15 over the summer. So there was that, and I think that's about all I have to say, other than I got to put in my little plug here. Bloom. Please subscribe if you enjoy these videos. I try and do them every week. Usually they go up on Saturday, sometimes on Sunday. And the main channel as well. I mean, that'll all be linked down below. I can finally put like outside links in my description boxes on this channel. Yay! But mostly, I mean, mostly I just link to other streams and whatnot from that. So let's go to here. Thank you for watching. I think I was saying on my Zamo stream, I really need to update this so I have Zamo in it, or do a Zamo specific version of this, but we'll get around to that eventually, maybe, probably never. Someone can be annoyed. And what I'm going to leave you guys with on the outro is my live drawing with Pyrrha playlist on my main channel, so you can check out all the streams and all. I started live streaming this January, so there's now, I guess, there must be 100 by now, right? You know, I mean, the first few weeks I was only doing it weekly, but, you know, it's getting close to 100. There's a whole bunch of streams on there that you can check out if you're bored and whatnot. And yeah, like, subscribe, yada, yada, yada. You know the drill. Anyways, thank you for watching, and we will see you again real soon. Bye.